Major news unfolding in New York today. President-elect Donald Trump's sentencing for his May criminal trial in relation to hush money payments now delayed for time number 3. CBS News politics reporter Jake Rosen is live with us from West Palm Beach, right near the president-elect's Mar-a-Lago. What is the reaction to this from Camp Trump?
Well, we have not heard anything yet officially from them, Reed, although they took kind of a victory lap on Tuesday when there were some court filings indicating what would happen here, especially in terms of what the Manhattan DA did in terms of not arguing to keep this date where it was set for in about a week from now. We have to remember that Donald Trump's whole campaign really, especially after that conviction, was built around this, quote, lawfare, a Department of Justice that was going after Donald Trump for years. They used this case as the prime example of it, especially because he was proved guilty, and his poll numbers really reflected that. After he was found guilty, his poll numbers really didn't go below 50%, and the Republican Party really rallied around him, especially after that Matt Gaetz pick, controversial as we know, withdrew yesterday, but he was one of those people who Donald Trump wanted to put in place to make sure that that did not happen to him again under the next administration.
Right, and this is not to say that this case goes away forever, but there is some indication from the president-elect's team that they would like it to go away forever and are taking some official moves to make that happen. What's happening there?
Right, and so the Trump campaign has argued since that presidential immunity decision over the summer that they wanted this case to completely go away and have moved to dismiss it. We'll wait to see whether that paperwork officially comes in over the next couple of days. There'll be a hearing soon on that. Now, in addition to that, the Manhattan DA's office is well aware of the fact that because of that decision, could be some potential discussion on what evidence was included in the trial that would give Trump some immunity and would not be included again in that final verdict. And they are basically not arguing with the fact that this decision was to punt this sentencing, although we don't know, Reed, yet how far they would be willing to go, whether it's to aim to do it towards the end of a potential Trump term or way after, or potentially don't even try to move to settle this for the next years to come.
All right, so Jake, also we understand there's more breaking news here, and to sort of set this up and to frame it, Matt Gaetz was the president-elect's choice to be attorney general. That went down in flames yesterday. But then we had a lot of questions because of what the president-elect put on Truth Social, sort of saying, I look forward to seeing what Mr. Gaetz does from here. He forecast into the future. On the point of the future of Matt Gaetz, you have some breaking news about whether he'll return to Congress, because he could still come back to Congress, correct?
We do. And so Matt Gaetz, because he technically won his election in November for the 119th Congress, the one that gets sworn in early next year, he could rejoin, even though he technically has resigned from this Congress, which would go between now and January. Now, Matt Gaetz said today on a radio show hosted by conservative influencer and activist Charlie Kirk down here in Florida that he's willing to fight for Donald Trump, but it will not be in Congress. He said that 8 years in Congress was enough for him, and he's hoping to move on. Now, there's some speculation of whether that could be a run for potentially that Senate seat that would open up if Marco Rubio is officially confirmed to be Secretary of State, or potentially after Ron DeSantis, who is term limited, leaves office in a couple years, he could potentially run for that seat as well. He's an extremely popular politician among that MAGA base. We saw that really when it came down to these confirmation fights between the more traditional conservatives in the Senate and those MAGA ones who were really defending Gaetz wherever it came down to. But Matt Gaetz, as of this morning, saying that he was no longer interested in serving in Congress and he would stick to his resignation letter he submitted last week.
All right, so tee up somebody who people know a lot about where you're standing there in the state of Florida, Pam Bondi for Attorney General. That is now Team Trump's pick to go forward into the confirmation process. For a nation that doesn't know about Pam Bondi, get us caught up on who she is, what she's about, and what maybe her journey would be going into confirmation.
So Bondi is the former Florida Attorney General. She was a Trump ally and one of the first Florida statewide officials in 2016 to endorse Donald Trump over Marco Rubio, who you'll remember ran against Donald Trump way back then. Pam Bondi has been right by Donald Trump's side through a lot of these legal issues. She was a vocal defender of Donald Trump during that Manhattan trial that we just spoke about, going to court with him at times, even alongside Matt Gaetz. So you have to really, that was a crucial time really in Donald Trump's Attorney General picking history that time at the trial. She's someone who Donald Trump says will really focus on immigration and crime, the two things that a Department of Justice head should do in the former president and president-elect's words. And we'll see whether there's really an easier path. It looks looks, although, in the immediate time since this pick was announced last night, a lot of favorable reaction, and someone who has been an attorney general on a statewide level, which Matt Gaetz had not, which really gives her that credential to really carry herself into the next couple of weeks and months in meetings on the Hill.
So, Jake, 4 major cabinet choices still remain unannounced. We continue watching conversations about the Treasury position. You see right here on the monitor behind me, there are not faces right there in that graphic. Secretary of the Treasury, Secretary of Housing and Urban Development, Secretary of Agriculture, and the Secretary of Labor. Pick one of those and let us know if you're hearing any candidates. And when do you think we could hear some of those faces filled in?
Well, there's 2 that I'll focus on. The first is Department of Treasury. There's been some speculation and reporting over the last couple of weeks that there's really been a contentious battle over who gets this role. Is it tied to a potential departure of Jerome Powell as Fed chair in terms of giving someone that role temporarily? In addition to that, Department of Labor. CBS News can confirm that Republican Congressman Lori Chavez, the Reamer, met with Donald Trump yesterday at Mar-a-Lago to discuss that potential labor role. There has been no announcements on any of those fronts that you just named, although I would expect that we see a lot more coming into next week and Thanksgiving, where Donald Trump and his allies have signaled he wants to have all the picks wrapped up by the holiday a week from now.
Jake Rosen, CBS News politics reporter. My friend, I'm glad you got the black shirt with white button memo. Looking smart there in West Palm Beach. Thank you very, very much.
You too.
All right, so we continue this conversation from Florida now to where the rubber meets the road in the halls of Congress. CBS News congressional correspondent Scott McFarland joins us now with more. Let's circle back to Mr. Gaetz' decision not to join Congress again. How does this really impact the president-elect's agenda in the House?
It's one more vote he won't have when he takes office January 20th, because they're going to have to fill this vacancy that Matt Gaetz has left effective January 3rd as well. That requires a special election, that requires logistics, that requires time. You can't just have a special election like this. You have to have candidates, ballots, polling places.
Right.
So when President-elect Trump takes office after inauguration, he has this precariously narrow majority in the U.S. House, estimated at 220 to 215 or 221 to 214. But you'll recall, President-elect Trump already has sights set on taking 2 of those House Republicans for his administration, Elise Stefanik of New York and Michael Waltz of Florida. That makes the margins narrower. There's going to be an ambitious legislative rollout. He has incredibly little margin for error in the House, almost no votes to spare, and now Matt Gaetz is gone and not coming back. That may dampen some of the ambitions in the first few weeks, even the first few months.
So, Scott, let's talk about Delaware's Sarah McBride, elected to Congress. McBride, a transgender person, and already there's controversy over bathrooms. You have some exclusive reporting to bring to our viewers.
Sarah McBride is the first transgender member elected to Congress ever. She's been here over the past week for orientation, training. When you get elected to Congress, they bring you here before you swear the oath of office to learn how to run an office, how to do the parliamentary procedures of the House, and kind of stand you up before you take office and represent your district. Sarah McBride, as she was here for orientation, got met with this new House rule, which prohibits the use of bathrooms by the transgender community, the use of bathrooms with which they identify in terms of gender. This is a rule that Sarah McBride told CBS News was unnecessary. She had no expectations or anticipation of using a multi-stall bathroom anyhow. And she says if they had just asked her that, they wouldn't have needed to have passed this rule, but they didn't bother to ask her the question. She recognizes she's going to be a lightning rod for any number of issues from the Republican majority, but she's told CBS News, Reed, she was surprised that they're already targeting her with rules before she even takes the oath of office on January 3rd.
Much more to come on that, for sure. You also have some exclusive reporting on just how long the backlog is for the emergency disaster funds, especially timely right now when we're talking about people that are rebounding still from hurricanes, still from wildfires. Walk us through, Scott, what's happening.
There is a pressing issue in those areas impacted by Hurricanes Helene and Maria, and yes, by the wildfires. The Small Business Administration's disaster loan program here in Washington, which is huge and important, it helps homeowners and businesses get loans to rebuild from the damage, ran out of money in October. They raised red flags, urged Congress to move and get the fund replenished so those disaster-impacted families could get some money. Congress left here again yesterday without replenishing that fund, with no expectation they'll do so before the next spending deadline to fund the government, December 20th. Ted Budd, a senator from North Carolina, told me they need that money yesterday, that these backlogs are growing. And our CBS News reporting as the day began here in Washington is there are now tens of thousands of pending applications for emergency loans that cannot be acted on because there is no money indefinitely.
Scott McFarland, CBS News congressional correspondent, our thoughts with all of the people who are waiting for that money in the rebound of hurricanes and wildfires. Thank you so much for talking to us on CBS News 24/7. So the war in Ukraine at escalation stages like anything we've seen in several months. Missiles flying both ways between Russia and Ukraine. The big question today is Russian President Vladimir Putin sending a warning to the United States in his choice of weaponry, in missiles. We're going to break down the who, what, where, when, and why, and the weapons when we come back. Let's get back to that escalation between Ukraine and Russia. After Monday, when President Biden greenlit Ukraine to fire U.S.-made long-range missiles into Russia. Well, by Tuesday, escalation. Russian President Vladimir Putin lowered Russia's threshold for using nuclear weapons when Ukraine fired those American-made ATACMS, as they're called, for the first time since the start of the war. Wednesday, more escalation. Ukraine then fired British-made missiles into Russia, and the U.S. closed the embassy in Kyiv, warning of a threat of what they called a significant air attack. By Thursday, Russia fired an experimental non-nuclear ballistic missile into Ukraine. So a lot of discussion right now, and you can expect this in the days and weeks ahead, about Russia's weaponry. Russia calls it a new non-nuclear ballistic missile with medium range. You can see almost like fire from the sky raining down there. Vladimir Putin says that that attack is a direct response to what he calls reckless decisions from the West. So let's bring in Dr. Stephen Wills. Mr. Wills, you're a navalist for the Center for Maritime Strategy. What do we know about these intermediate range missiles that Russia fired yesterday? We understand that we need to classify those as MRIVs, but tell us first of all about that first.
Hey, Reed, thank you so very much for having me this afternoon. First of all, we believe this to be the Russian RS-26 intermediate range ballistic missile. And it's got a unique twist on it because it combines a couple of Cold War technologies into one system. So intermediate range ballistic missiles have been around for a long time. We had a treaty with the Russians until 2019 to limit these weapons. And we left that treaty at that time under the assumption that the Russians were cheating. And this may be one of the products of that cheating effort. The difference with this intermediate range weapon is it combines something from the ballistic missile, intercontinental ballistic missile category, which is multiple independently retargetable reentry vehicles, or MIRVs. This is something developed in the 1970s so that one missile could carry multiple nuclear warheads. The difference here is the Russians have armed this with conventional warheads, where in the past intermediate range weapons have had a unitary single warhead. So this really complicates the defensive picture in trying to defend against these types of weapons. Thankfully, at least so far, this seems to be an experimental weapon, so we may not see many of these yet on the battlefield, but their implications for further use, especially around the world, are disturbing, I think.
Experimental weaponry for sure, but do you think also a message in choosing that particular weapon by Russia?
Yes, it certainly fits within this escalation cycle that we've seen take place, that you noted in your timeline, that we had the lifting of the U.S. ban on the use of ATACMS inside of Russia itself. The British and the French have allowed the use of Storm Shadow Scalp that you mentioned earlier this summer already. Mr. Putin obviously and very dramatically staged his response first, making the threat that caused the evacuation of those embassies in Kyiv, and then actually doing the launch itself. So maybe we've seen this particular escalation cycle play out. I certainly hope so that it's done. But again, the implications of this weapon going forward, I think, are significant.
Let's talk about those ATACMS. You mentioned them, and I think we are in an age and era where we are going to have to get familiar with what they are.
Yeah, ATACMS is a system developed during the Cold War, and it has real use within the current Ukraine-Russia conflict. We developed this weapon system as part of what used to be called air-land battle, which was the U.S. and NATO response to a projected Soviet invasion of Western Europe during the Cold War. These missiles were designed to be fired deep into Soviet rear areas and disrupt their ability to resupply their troops and tanks and move further troops and forces forward. So to disrupt in the rear area. They've had use in Operation Desert Storm, and we used them again in Operation Iraqi Freedom in 2003 with great success. So this is a proven weapon system, and it has both unitary warheads and distributive small munitions too. So really good against armored vehicles.
Okay, so we're also hearing about so-called storm shadows. What are their capabilities and uses?
That's a 300-mile range missile. That's an air-launched cruise missile. It has a bunker buster capability, so it's a very capable weapon, and we've already seen it in use. It's been credited with the destruction of one of the Russians' 5 cruise missile-capable Kilo-class submarines. These are submarines that have been used extensively in the Ukraine conflict to surreptitiously launch cruise missiles against the Ukrainians, and for which they don't really have a defense against. Ukraine doesn't have an anti-submarine warfare capability. So this has been a really useful Russian weapon system. But this particular submarine, Rostov-on-Don, was hit in dock and probably destroyed, or at least severely damaged, by a Storm Shadow missile. That same attack also likely wrecked one of the Russian amphibious warfare ships designed to transport tanks and troops. So definitely this weapon system is getting some play in the war already.
Dr. Stephen Wills talking about that intersection between the science of weaponry, politics, and war. We appreciate you so much. That was such an informative conversation.
Thank
you.
you.
Have a good weekend.
You
We
as well.
have some breaking news coming out of the Lone Star State as it relates to a push to get Bibles and Bible teaching in classrooms. Word of a school board decision when we come back.
Roll call vote has been requested and it will be granted. I will explain what we're voting on again. So if you would like to remove all the ELAR Bluebonnet components from the list of approved materials, you should vote yes. Yes equals removal from the list. If you would like to leave it on.
What you're listening to is the minutia of a Texas school board considering whether to vote to make sure that Bible-infused teachings are in classrooms in the state of Texas, in elementary schools there. Well, some movement happened after what we just played, and here's your headline. Members voted 8-7 in favor of the new curriculum after hearing hours of impassioned pleas from supporters and critics earlier this week. The decision set to possibly impact more than 5 million students across the state of Texas. Some people arguing that, yes, we want Bible-based teachings in the classrooms. Others saying, what about Muslim students, Buddhist students, and students who do not come from cultures or backgrounds where the Bible is taught in their homes? But it looks like now that is going through in the state of Texas. CBS News correspondent Jason Allen is on the ground in Irving, Texas. He's been speaking to parents both in support and proposal, like we just talked about. So what went down in that vote? It sounded like it was complicated there at the last minute.
It was, and the reason for that, Reed, is the people who are opposed to this, the members of the state board that didn't want this curriculum in, they were trying everything they could do to maybe pull 1 or 2 votes over to their side. So they were trying to separate out these issues, right? The math portion of the curriculum from the portion that's the English, the language, the arts, and the reading, the portion that contains some of those Bible stories and lessons. They thought maybe we can vote on these separately, we can vote down that, but it didn't happen that way. This stayed with an 8-7 vote. So that's what was going on. It was a very civil process. There's been a lot of emotion in the debate leading up to this. So it was a very civil parliamentary process. But the end result of it is this will be on the approved list of curriculums that schools across the state can choose from.
There's also the flip side, and I've seen some chatter about this. Okay, so what if a Buddhist group wants to have their scripture taught in classroom? What if a Muslim student wants their scripture taught in classrooms? Does this make the way for those students to have a voice there in a classroom as well, where the Bible is now going to be mandated as being part of the classroom curriculum?
That's been some of the bulk of the opposition to this. Is a lot of people on the Board of Education that were against it felt like some of those students might be left out. Maybe they would feel just alienated in schools. Maybe they've even suggested they might feel bullied by it. Now, on the other side of that, the proponents of this curriculum never felt like it's going that far, that these lessons, these stories are kind of these all-encompassing human values. They're tied into things that other religions kind of have, and that doing it from a Christian standpoint and point of view connects back more to the founding fathers of the nation. They said that's the reason for the inclusion. But even today, some board members suggested maybe it even leaves the state open to legal action. That was one board member's concern, and we'll see the result of this in the months to come.
Yeah, state schools, state money, and then the larger conversation, separation of church and state in these United States. Do you foresee any litigation coming out of this?
It's possible, as I mentioned, that's the concern of one of the members of the Board of Education. Keep in mind, schools don't have to use this. It's up to schools and school districts what curriculum that they want. Now, there's a little bit of an incentive with this. Because it's on an approved list, there's it's a total of $60. It's divided into two portions, $40 and $20, that schools will get. Some of that goes toward printing some of the material. Some of it's just some extra incentive to use the curriculum. Of course, in the state of Texas and really across the nation, school districts are extremely tight on their budgets right now. It's very possible some schools look at that and say we want to use it, but at the end of the day, it is up to schools whether they want to do it or not.
All right, stay with us because we now have that moment that we want to play for our viewers when the vote went through. We just want to let our viewers hear it.
8 yes, 7 no.
8-7, the motion passes. Bluebonnet will be added to the approved list.
So now hearing that, it is now set in stone, so to speak. What is next for a student in the state of Texas? When can they start seeing this?
So this goes on to the approved list now. It'll be available for schools to use in the 25 and 26 school year. Now, there are all kinds of curriculums that they can choose from. There are other things that are on the approved list, things they were voting on today. Obviously, with this one, it does include those Bible lessons. So it's possible this could be in some elementary school classrooms when they go back to school next August.
All right, thank you so much for that live report out of the Lone Star State. Good to see you once again on CBS News 24/7, my friend. When we come back, we'll be talking about your wallet. It is going to feel the pinch because of something called Early Black Friday. Are you shopping already? We see you scrolling out there. Watching CBS News 24/7. Let us know what your deals are. We're back after the break. On your Money Watch report today, as President-elect Donald Trump names his cabinet picks, we're asking what those picks will mean for big business. Just hours after Matt Gaetz withdrew consideration for Attorney General, Donald Trump named his new choice, Pam Bondi. CBS News contributor J.D. Durkin joins us now from New York. J.D., Matt Gaetz said that he would work to break up big tech. So what do we know about Pam Bondi and how she feels about big tech?
Well, Reed, I think it's still a little unclear exactly how the former Attorney General of Florida is actually going to go about her approach to big tech. I mean, Matt Gaetz has had the advantage of being a member of the House of Representatives for many years, sitting inside these committee hearings. But for Bondi, I think her approach to tech is still largely unknown. It is worth noting that she has been working as a lobbyist on behalf of Brian Ballard, one of the most important Trump-aligned lobbyists in Washington. And among her clients included the government of Qatar, and then really notable companies like Amazon, Uber, as well as General Motors. Also worth noting, it's the same lobbying firm where Susie Wiles has been working, of course, soon to be President-elect Donald Trump's White House chief of staff. So while we don't exactly know what Bondi's approach is, I think it's worth looking at some of the other picks and nominees, including Brendan Carr. That's who Donald Trump picked to lead the FCC. He has been an incredibly outspoken critic over the perception of censoring conservative voices on platforms like Facebook. So while we don't really know the details here, Reed, I think it's safe to say we can assume an Attorney General Pam Bondi to be as aligned with that type of approach to big tech. And I think that underscores the challenge for the Mark Zuckerbergs and the Jeff Bezoses of the world, who were very quick to congratulate the incoming president and hope to avoid the worst of what his White House might mean for their future.
Right. So let's go from political cachet to cash. We know the big names and big tech are gearing up for Black Friday. It is known as something that they need to have to really balance the books and really get those big numbers for that weekend. It's 1 week away, but I'm already seeing those early deals on Amazon. This is a new strategy. They don't just save it for that day or that week.
No, they don't. And in fact, if anyone had been watching what was an amazing Thursday night football game last night between in the snow between the Browns and the Pittsburgh Steelers, you couldn't help but notice there was a lot of promotion for Black Friday because it's no longer just that day. It's now a week of Black Friday sales, which is great for those of us that love to put off our holiday shopping into the last minute. Also not great for people that had hoped to maybe to try and save a bit of money because the deals out there are really good, Reed. Almost 40 different categories of electronics, at home decor, fashion, beauty, toys, you name it. You can get these items at a significant discount. We talked a little bit earlier about the Apple Watch 10 down from $400 all the way down to $329. Flat screen televisions are on sale. And I think it's important for the company not just to encourage Black Friday week shopping, but try and use this as an opportunity to get an uptick in subscribers to the regular Amazon Prime memberships as well.
I didn't think about it that way, but you are right. This boosts subscribers to get all the benefits from that. And you know what? You also bring up an interesting dynamic, and that's those of us who, like me, who wait until Black Friday to make those purchases. For instance, my leaf blower, I'm waiting to get it through the Black Friday deal. I've got a pile of leaves, by the way. Is that a new thing and part of their strategy as well? Put things off and get it then?
Yeah, I think it probably is. I mean, I admit, just in terms of my own individual consumer habits and the way that I use Amazon Prime, I might have the idea for things around September, October, and then I go to Amazon and I say, well, wait a minute, it's still kind of full price right now. Let me wait until the week of Black Friday and see if those prices come down. I know you and I are not alone in that, Reed. So people may not even know if they weren't watching Thursday night football last night, that Steelers game in the snow, or if they haven't opened up the Amazon app yet today or yesterday, they may not even realize that those Black Friday sales are already well underway. But inevitably, I think this is going to be a very busy week for the folks over at Amazon Prime.
Right, you make me think forward to that very cold Green Bay Packers game. I might need some boot warmers and some mitt warmers. I'm going to go look for that as well. Okay, so if you're not into football, this is also going to be a big weekend in entertainment. This is not just a movie story and a story whether you like Gladiator or Wicked. This is really a money story. Wicked won. It's Paramount's property, also Gladiator 2 in theaters for Glicked, which is sort of the Barbenheimer answer this year. Big money weekend potential. How crucial is it for these studios to really get that big figure on this opening weekend?
Well, that's the $244 million question, and
Right.
That's the number because that's what the opening weekend box office figure was for Barbenheimer last summer. And obviously for an industry that has come under tremendous pressure since COVID, a lot of industries were significantly disrupted, but the in-person movie theater going experience, we're so far off those 2018, 2019 numbers. So they needed the shot in the arm from Barbenheimer last summer. And if you're Universal and Paramount for Wicked and Gladiator 2, respectively, you're hoping to capture a lot of that. But, listen, there's been a lot of other things at play. I follow, for instance, things like NBA ratings very closely, and they've seen those ratings go down, and they're blaming a number of other factors. They're saying maybe there's fatigue from watching other sports. There's fatigue after the election. People have been so tuned in to all these other noise and things paying attention to that maybe they don't want to watch NBA games. Maybe that's the same for movie theaters as well. Maybe people just have a little bit of burnout from having their attention split in so many other directions. $2.3 billion was what the two big films last summer brought in. So while there is healthy competition between Wicked and Gladiator 2, I'm sure, as we said earlier, a rising tide lift all boats is something that both theaters, as long as they do really well, they make a lot of money, both studios rather, I'm sure they don't mind seeing people pay, go to the theater, and catch a double feature in the process.
Well, one thing I've learned in life, J.D. Durkin, on a Friday is this, and you can write this down in the Get to Know You file. You don't tick off a witch or a gladiator, and especially you don't tick off the executives in the film office by getting those lower numbers. Thank you so much. Nice to talk to you. You raced to Gladiator, and like I say, I'm going to be in line for Wicked. J.D. Durkin.
Looking forward to it.
Nice
Thanks.
to have you. Hey, a deadly bomb cyclone continues to batter the Pacific Northwest, maybe driving a lot of people into movie theaters this weekend. That's if the power's on. Heavy winds and rain also smashing trees into houses. There's a tragic headline to report here. It's not just a weather story now. It's a story of family tragedies. 2 people killed from this storm. It's a bomb cyclone then drove that atmospheric river over northern California. And it's been major there. In fact, we go to Santa Rosa, California, just about an hour north of San Francisco. And that's where we find a very waterlogged Veronica Macias of CBS News Bay Area. You are next to a creek where the waters are swelling right there. What's the concern where you are in Santa Rosa, California, Veronica?
Well, right now, Reed, we've spoken to the fire department and they tell us, thankfully, the number of calls has significantly gone down compared to yesterday evening and overnight. So there seems to be a break here. But we are seeing a downpour right now, and the creek behind us is swelling at the moment. But that's been the cycle that the fire department has been seeing here, where the water rises and then recedes. So they're keeping a close eye on things. And crews, meanwhile, have been busy clearing things along this creek, along the city streams, because when the creek swells, that's what causes all of the road closures. And we've seen several of them this morning, where we've seen drivers in Santa Rosa where they find themselves stuck on flooded streets, and some thankfully turning around and avoiding the mess. And people who live around this creek tell me that they're hopeful their homes won't be affected. And well, like you said, there have been some tragedies reported already. They're relieved that California is seeing this rain.
It looks like it might have actually gone down a little bit because there's debris up higher, so I'm not too worried about it. It's more of a curiosity. We've had other rain like this and been okay. I think Santa Rosa is going to be okay, at least this part.
But again, the concern is this rushing water behind us. We could see that earlier. The water had been significantly higher here, so crews will maintain an eye on things here. And over at the city's municipal yard, people are picking up sandbags there. Some people telling us water is already starting to creep into their properties.
All right, so many people rushing to help others. We've even seen in Northern California rescues in parking lots. Veronica Macias, we know it's going to be a long and very wet weekend. Thank you so much for your reporting. So let's bring in Jess right now. And Jess and I can tell you, we've been watching Veronica's reports. Let's see, for about the last 5 hours, she's been standing out in the rain. And it's going to be like that for the people who live all over Northern California. It's going to be days of sustained water.
Exactly. And you know, we're starting to see downed trees and power outages due to the consistency of the rain and the winds too. We don't even talk about the winds as much as we should be, with wind gusts up to around 75 miles per hour, wide stretch throughout the Sierra and then over into the Bay Area. They're dealing with some gusty conditions too. Wind speeds there a little bit lighter, closer to around 30-40 mile per hour winds. That wind advisory will expire later tonight, but this storm has packed its punch the past couple days, bringing in heavy rain, snow, and of course the winds too. And let's dive into the science behind it. Of course, you've heard it a lot this week, bomb cyclone. Well, now that bomb cyclone that's sitting just off the Pacific Northwest has an area of low pressure sweeping underneath it. And those two are almost dancing together. They're circulating around each other, and this creates what we call the Fujiwara effect. And what does that mean for us? Well, it means that we're going to continue to see heavy rain, downpour, and of course snow up into the Sierra and all throughout the Cascades as we head into the coming days. And just south of that, of course, that's where we're dealing with that atmospheric river into the Bay Area. We're seeing heavy amounts of rain staying consistent in the communities where Veronica's at right now, with closer to around 20 inches of rain over into Sonoma as we head into the afternoon hours today. Now, this area of low pressure sitting just offshore continues to ring in heavy amounts of snow and rain up into the sea, up into Washington and Oregon too. And I bring that up to say that they've been dealing with power outages widespread throughout that region. We mix the winds into that. This system is going to stick around as we head into the evening hours tonight, and we'll see more showers into the forecast this weekend leading up to Thanksgiving week. The next big story, and I already know it's going to happen Monday and Tuesday, everyone's going to be traveling and they're going to be wondering, how can I get to my destination if I'm still dealing with this mess?
That's why you're so important every day for us, but especially this weekend, people planning their travels. Jessica, thank you so much. Look at this. Jeff Bezos' space tourism Blue Origin back in the sky for its 9th crewed space flight. There it is. Van Horn, Texas, out of El Paso, the place for the burn and the liftoff. There it goes. On board, 3 entrepreneurs, a J.P. Morgan Chase director, an aviator, and an MIT engineer. That capsule launched more than 62 miles above the surface of the Earth. There she goes. That rocket company now checks off 28 missions overall in its goal to advance space tourism. All right, you see that. To New York City, where the trial of the veteran accused of using a deadly chokehold continues. Daniel Penny accused of killing Jordan Neely. Thursday, a forensic pathologist testified that chokehold did not cause the death, but on cross-examination, prosecutors said Neely's cause of death was unanimously agreed upon as caused by the chokehold. Toxic smoke polluting the air in New Delhi. Look at that. The cause? Emissions and the burning of agricultural fields. It's so bad that Swiss group IQ Air keeps India's capital in the hazardous zone, well beyond the threshold number. That year, that group named New Delhi as the worst polluted capital. Pollution so bad in New Delhi that many people say they can't even leave their homes. That's it for us at CBS News 24/7 for this hour. We thank you so much not only for watching today, but every day. We want to be your source for breaking news. We continue watching these monitors for the latest developments. And do let us know, Wicked or Gladiator? Have a great weekend.